For the Committee of Ways and Means, Tuesday, March 29th, 2022. And Chairman Reynolds asked for a roll call vote to begin the meeting. So Chairman Reynolds.
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty.
Aye.
Councilor Mackin is not attending this evening. And Councilor Maglio.
Aye.
That's 3 present.
Okay. Due to the fact that we have just received some information this afternoon relevant to tonight's conversation, I have felt that it would be important for us to take a brief recess for us to familiarize ourselves with the updates. And therefore, I'm going to ask for us to go into recess. And by doing so, I will ask Clerk Semino for a roll call, aye or nay. Clerk Semino.
Councilor Reynolds.
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty.
Aye.
Councilor Mackin is not attending. Councilor Maglio.
Aye.
We're now in recess.
That is approval, and we are now in recess. We will be back shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like most parents, you dream that your kids will have a good education. You hope they'll be able to go to college or receive vocational training. You want to help your children as much as you can. Did you know that you can start investing in your baby's future today? The Baby Steps Savings Plan is a program offered by the Massachusetts State Treasurer's Office. It's a seeded college savings account program that encourages saving for college in the U Fund, the Massachusetts 529 plan. It lets you invest in your child's post-high school education and training. You'll even get a free $50 deposit when you enroll. Any baby born or adopted on or after January 1st, 2020, who is a Massachusetts resident can be enrolled in Baby Steps. Children can be enrolled in Baby Steps until they turn 1. And adopted children are also eligible up to 1 year after their adoption date. Here's how Baby Steps works. Take the first step by checking the box on the worksheet you receive at the hospital, or enroll online at babystepssavingsplan.org. Next, open a U Fund 529 college savings account, and we'll make an initial $50 deposit. After that, you can contribute to the account to build up savings as often as you want. The program also offers free financial education for your family. The earlier you start adding to the account, the more money your child will have for future aspirations like college tuition, vocational training, and other school expenses. It's a fact. Kids with college savings are more likely to attend college after high school. Take the first step. Learn more at babystepssavingsplan.org.
So, thank you. I appreciate everybody's patience with us as we had an opportunity from the committee perspective to read the responses that were received this afternoon. And I do appreciate your indulgence with us as we did that. So we are now out of recess. This evening, we will have only 3 Ways and Means Committee members present. Committee member Councilor Mackin, unfortunately, had a conflict this evening and will not be able to join us. So I do again appreciate your patience. So that being said, we did receive a number of updates from the mayor's office concerning the questions that were presented in last week's meeting, as well as the questions of my memo previous to that. And I do again appreciate the time spent. We do also understand and the sensitivities around this this process. So it was our understanding also that this evening we may get some additional information provided. However, I will leave that up to Chief of Staff Taub to provide that type of an update and the level of what that update may include. So with that, I'd like to offer Chief of Staff Taub the opportunity to open up tonight's comments.
Thank you very much, Chairman Reynolds. Good evening. Oh,
There's a hand up there.
I apologize.
Clerk Semino.
we have
Yes,
to take it off the table.
we need to take off the table order 22017.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. So we have that being said, do I have a motion to take off the table order of business 22017?
Motion to take off the table order 22017.
We have the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, terrific. Clerk Semino, a roll call, please.
Counselor Reynolds,
Aye.
Counselor Flaherty,
Aye.
Counselor Mackin's not in attendance. Counselor Maglio,
Aye.
Okay,
3 in
that's
favor.
unanimous. Very good. Thank you. All right, now in earnest and legally, we can start this conversation up again. And again, I turn to Chief of Staff Taub, if you'd please open up with your comments.
Thank you very much, Chairman Reynolds. Good evening, members of the committee. First and foremost, we are joined again this evening by Brandon and Anthony here with us on behalf of the company, as well as Margaret LaForest from the Massachusetts Office of Business Development, who I believe has found a corner tucked away at an offsite location in order to be with us this evening. So thank you to the team, but more importantly, thank you to the members of the committee for taking the time today. As was referenced earlier today, we provided responses to what I believe are all of the questions received to date with regards to the request before the committee, as well as a copy of the state's worksheet, which sets forth kind of some of the number crunching that goes into play with the application of a TIF to the property and the benefit not only to the tenant, but also to the town as far as the long-term revenue forecast generated from the facility. We were anticipating the big reveal today of the client name and proposed tenant for the property, but as things sometimes go due to matters out of our control, which I'll leave to Brandon to discuss in more detail, we are looking at a delay of just a few more days in order to be able to formally provide that detail to the committee. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would turn it over to Brandon to talk a little bit more about that. And then we can certainly continue to field questions that the committee has with regards to this request.
Certainly, the chair recognizes Mr. Pyers.
Thank you, Chairman Reynolds, and members of the committee. Great to speak with you again. Thank you for your time. So to Chief of Staff Taub's earlier comments, we did fully anticipate the big reveal tonight, and we were scheduled to do so. However, we have been in discussions with Project Revere and their representatives throughout the day, and unfortunately, we are unable to identify the company and disclose the name of who will be the tenant at the 400 Wood Street property this evening. Unfortunately, the reason for this delay is due to the fact that a board of directors meeting will not occur until Friday, which will authorize the company to continue their lease negotiations at the site with the landlord. Upon that authorization, they will then be able to disclose the name to the members of this committee so that you can perform the necessary due diligence and research to better understand the company that is petitioning you for consideration for this tax increment financing agreement. We're hopeful that you can understand some of the confidential nature of this. It certainly is a situation that we had hoped would have been resolved. Unfortunately, it's somewhat beyond our control due to calendars. And we look forward to communicating that immediately upon authorization on Friday afternoon. And we're hopeful that we can still continue this dialogue and with the objective of receiving a favorable recommendation from the committee and moving this process forward before the full council. So I'm happy to answer any questions which we can on that. But we thought it was important, and this has been something we've been working up to probably the last 3 minutes on prior to this call being engaged, to try to find a way to make this happen tonight. Unfortunately, from a disclosure perspective, there was just no way around this. So with that, I will turn it back to Chairman Reynolds.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, obviously, it is just a little disappointing. However, I think a date of Friday, from my perspective, would be still workable for us, giving us some lead time and an opportunity, as you referred to, Brandon, for our ability as committee members to perform a bit more due diligence on top of the information that we have provided. So I'm just hoping it's not going to be an April Fool's joke on us.
Oh,
It's poor calendar timing, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. All right. In all seriousness, though, that I would like to ask the committee members at this time for any comments they may have on this recent update. So I guess we could start with you, Councilwoman Flaherty.
Oh, thank you. I don't really have a comment. I just have a question. In the presentation that we were given a few days ago, you talked about how, you were looking forward to 15, 20, 30, 40 years duration. And of course, Braintree will be here long after that. And so my question is, since you are leasing rather than purchasing, if you did make a decision to move to another location for whatever reason, how specific are the equipment, the way that the investment will be construed in the building itself to accommodate your particular client's needs versus what any life science industry that might come after your client would need? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is how hard would it be for us to get another person to lease the space if your client left?
Mm-hmm. So thank you for your question, Counselor. I would address it in two ways. One, the equipment that the company will be putting into service, largely tangible personal property, which is specifically things that can be moved, is highly specialized and expensive and directly related to our client's manufacturing process. From a real estate point of view, i.e. the things that would go in the building that you would not move in the event that, in the worst case scenario in the future, the company were to exit the building, that would be largely clean room space. So what is essentially happening is our client is facilitating investment through a conjunction of their own capital and landlord tenant improvements that will modernize the space, create a clean room environment, which is highly marketable in the Boston research and development, life science, medical device manufacturing real estate community. It would actually probably make the site more marketable than it currently is today.
Okay, so when your client, in the scenario, when your client left, they would take the highly specialized equipment that's suitable for their needs with them, and then they would leave behind the architecture, which involves the foundation for a clean room environment, which is useful for a wide variety of life science or biotechnology purposes.
Incredibly useful. And yes, that's exactly the scenario. Obviously, it's a scenario we don't hope for, but in that scenario, yes, that is accurate.
Okay, what is the client hoping for in terms of duration? Because 15 years is the negotiated term of the TIF, and 40 years is significantly beyond that. What is your client hoping for?
For duration of what? Specifically, I just want to make sure I'm
occupancy of the building.
So the current, and I obviously the lease terms are still evolving, but I can tell you that the current lease terms envisions roughly a 15-year lease with additional options on the back end of that. So they are going to have, within their legally binding agreement with the landlord, the tenant will have the ability to re-up at that site for additional periods. Commonly, those option periods are about 5 years. That is still a subject of negotiation at this point. But it will not be just a 15-year lease with a hard stopping end. There will be a sort of ability to extend that with the landlord should all parties involved decide to do so.
Okay. I'll let other counselors go ahead while I sort of think it through a little more.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Maglio, any questions or comments at this time?
So my excitement about this happening is slightly tempered by my feeling like there's so many more questions simply because of not knowing who the company is. So I guess what's going through my mind is, why does this have to be decided so quickly? I mean, this is a pretty short time frame. We've met twice now, I think, on this, and we need to have a decision by or you need a decision by the 5th. And I'm trying to understand that, why this is happening over such a short period of time.
So the answer to that would be is that the company is looking to make some of these investments, and those investments, specifically equipment reorders, requires significant upgrades to the building. So if they're going to be operational and relocate into this facility, that construction period, including validation, is a pretty extended period of time. They would like to have a lease executed sometime in April if this ultimately is a site that they're going to move forward on. The reason that this is being driven by the April 5th timeline is to enable that lease execution timeline, where they can begin to start setting schedules with the property owner to facilitate the improvements to the property, begin contracting with the various folks who are in significant high demand within the greater Boston life science market, in order to deliver that site on a date for which they could be able to be fully operational, and that would be in the 2024 timeframe, and begin to be shipping product out of that facility. It's largely driven by the real estate needs and the ability to improve it in order to meet production goals and schedules.
And so if there were to be, I don't know, a 2-week delay, what does that do? Like if it's April 20th as opposed to the 5th?
Well, the question would be, how far along is the company on a lease trajectory with the landlord? And is the landlord willing to grant them an extension of time to execute that lease? Those are two unknowns in the process. We know we would like to do it and make a commitment to the town of Braintree as soon as possible and secure this Wood Road property with the assistance of this tax increment financing agreement. And certainly it would be in line with prior precedent to ensure that the tax increment financing agreement and authorization to do so does not necessarily precede the lease agreement. I think if the board was comfortable with, reviewing the TIF document in more detail after a lease agreement was in place, there would certainly be some willingness to extend the timeline. However, that's not a common practice.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can I just follow up on that a little bit, if I may, Counselor? Brandon, so that's a good question. And I know that, and there was a very clear answer you gave. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. A couple of really main factors being, the components of the lease and that negotiations, as well as the competitiveness of trying to line up contractors in a very competitive environment at this particular point in time. And you do need the lead time, et cetera, on that. So I guess I would extend that hypothetical just a bit further so the council has approved this on the 5th. The full council has approved it. Do you have contingencies built in as well if there is a delay in the state's review committee's approval by the June timeframe?
Sorry, Chairman. I'm going to say that we have certain contingencies built within our lease as in current draft with the landlord. There is a methodology for how to pass these through, but largely, and Margaret, we can speak to some of the prior precedent here where it would not inherently be uncommon for the TIF agreement to be approved at the local level, the lease to be executed and then signed at the state level. So I'll let you kind of take that and speak as the representative of the Mass Office of Business Development, if that's acceptable, Chairman.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Brandon. So just to give the state piece of the timeline here. So we're talking about TIFs. Typically, we talked about the base valuation starting with the town's fiscal year, and that's a very important timeline of July 1. The state approval process has their next meeting June 16th. Paperwork is due for that meeting May 18th. And as you can see, all of us, whether it's municipal or it's state, as you're closing out your fiscal year, it's tough to bring a lot in there late. So we did talk about the timeline to bring this through. Different communities handle it different. I understand for Braintree, this is a new process. Oftentimes communities can bring a TIF in, have their review. The authorization vote would be for the mayor to then execute the TIF, and then the TIF details. You're seeing, I'm not sure if the draft TIF, I know we've been working through a lot of language. Your team has been doing yeoman's work on the edits around that to prepare it for you. But there's still ways to go relative to the state's approval to bring it forward to the meeting. And so that is what happens in the staff level. So we have to get this authorized by your town council for the mayor to then execute that. We need that all buttoned up and in the state EACC committee's hands by May 18th for approval at June 16th. So we are very much a part of that timeline. Myself, as this project started, did share with the committee my willingness to be at every committee hearing. I happen to be on vacation that April 20th, next town council meeting week. It's also school vacation, which could run into some challenges that week. So as you looked at it, this was the timeline that the company definitely has an urgency. You have a landlord, Hilco, who's had a long vacant building, and you can understand that they too have an urgency around getting this lease finalized and with their process to be prepared as we talk about setting this base valuation for your next fiscal year. So it's a busy time of year, the spring. I respect all the work and all the meetings that get brought to you to ensure they make your timeline, but that was part of how we set the schedule here.
Okay, and I just want to refer back to Councilor Maglio, and if you have any commentary on that answer, I appreciate that, Margaret.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I guess I understand the need to meet these deadlines. I understand the competitive nature. I understand the kinds of costs that could be involved or delays that could happen down the road. I guess my question was more about this is such a concentrated period of time. I guess I'm wondering, when did you actually start working on this property? Like when did this process begin? Maybe that would just give me some background on this.
If I may, through the chair. So just as a note, the next April meeting after the 5th is not until the 26th because of school vacation week. So we actually lose 3 weeks in that time period. And the value is we've actually have 3 weeks from the last meeting because of the extra week in March. So we did have the benefit of that extra week in between meetings. And as Margaret said, a commitment from the state team, from the company's team, and obviously from the mayor's office, a commitment to answer as many questions as we need to answer and be as many meetings as we need to be at in order to make sure that the committee feels comfortable with the information that's been provided. We started having conversations about this particular tenant and this code name project in January. I think it was early January of this year that we had, through the landlord, our first introduction to the company and to the proposal, and have been working with this team since that time to work through the details of the occupancy and the incentive that's available through the local option under the TIF program, and also looking at other factors, that we believe bring value to a Braintree occupancy, including local utilities, local water source, its location, and really kind of marketing Braintree as a valuable site and future location for this particular company. So, this, and Margaret can certainly speak more to this process generally, but this certainly isn't something that happened overnight. It's something that's been several months in the works, with a lot of work happening by everybody on this call. And I also think, and again, I would look to Margaret and the team, because they certainly have done more of these than I have. But my understanding is our timeline for council approval is actually somewhat more extended than what it is in most communities that are looking for authorization to enter into an agreement like this.
Nicole, I think to your point, what's really important to understand is as companies come forward and consider, and they ask us to keep in confidence what they're looking at the property, whether that's through the landlord or the client or their consultant, such as Deloitte, we're thinking about this location amongst other locations, and if they're in the Commonwealth, I'm working with all the different communities here. And geez, this is what we need to make this work, or this is where we're getting stuck. How can we get it to the next level? And I think I've mentioned this in the prior call. We've brought forward this Wood Road location to many life science companies, and to Councilor Flaherty's point about what is it. It is the reason that Haemonetics was there and did have that life science functionality that has made this address attractive to life science companies, but they haven't crossed the finish line. So I think as you bring it forward, for us, we don't want to present every opportunity. It's like the boy who cried wolf here, right? Every opportunity that comes down the line that is looking at it, we're not going to bring forward to the full council level. There's a lot of homework that goes into it on our end to get questions answered. Especially on companies, the life science companies working under code name, they need to feel comfortable. They need to present it to their board. They need to justify their numbers. Oftentimes they want apples to apples across a spreadsheet. And we're trying to get the information that they need to give you the best project for your community. And, as we've done a lot of work here, when you see TIFs come into other communities, it could come in town councils that are familiar with the process, with the product. A lot of the gateway cities use the program more frequently. And so they'll bring it in, they'll understand, they're going to authorize the mayor or the chief executive of the community to move forward with the negotiations. As you look at, yes, the council's the fiduciary responsibility, but the chief executive's role here is as your negotiator. So I think when we bring this forward, it seems to me the best procedure is to give you this draft TIF agreement document. The mayor would then be authorized. We're going to be working with the HED legal counsel to really button up and tighten that language. So whether the vote, I think, coming out would be, is the appetite for this town council to offer a tax increment financing agreement with the terms that's been discussed to proceed. And then the details really get worked out. As you've got the draft language, nothing substantive is going to change, but some of the legalese and making sure everything's in compliance with the statute is the final look. Our team has reviewed your CHIP document with a preliminary review, and next step will be bringing it forward to legal counsel. So giving them time and framework to get it tightened up for us to be there by May 18th. I wish I could move things faster for you, but there is, it does take time to get that level of detail with your project and the many other projects that we're working throughout the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Council Magley, you okay now with
Yes.
that? Yeah. Anything further on that point? Council Magley.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have a hand up from Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you. So as I understand it, the total financial sum that this TIF agreement affords the client in question to save is $1.2 million over a span of 15 years. Does the agreement being negotiated provide any assurances that this money will be reinvested into Braintree, since it's a global company and even in Massachusetts has more than one location?
You want me to take that one? They're making a commitment, a written commitment to you on job creation. That's a benefit to Braintree, creating these jobs in your community, 150 new jobs for Braintree, and also a $53 million capital expenditure. So you're providing $1 million in real estate tax relief, and you're in return receiving 150 new jobs for Braintree and a $53 million capital investment in 400 Wood Road.
So just so I make sure I understand, 125 people will be moved from another location to Braintree to fill
Correct.
those jobs, and then 25 additional jobs will be created in this location.
Right. So
that
for
will
the
be filled with people from this location.
right? So Commonwealth, considers for us, these are retained jobs, which is obviously very important. But for you, they're new jobs for Braintree, right? They're being relocated from another community. So you receive the benefit for you of 150 new jobs in Braintree, right? So 150 people who are not currently working within your community are coming to you at this location, right? So they'll be, spending money in your sub shops. They'll be purchasing gas. There's the ancillary benefits that come together from those employees as well.
Okay.
All set, Councilor Flaherty, on that question?
Yes, thank you.
If I may,
Yes.
Chairman Reynolds, just add one thing to that point. Another component of the agreement is a local preference. And so the agreement contains a provision that reasonable efforts will be made to hire for the 25 new employees from the Braintree area, and also to use contractors and other vendors who
Correct.
employ a local Braintree workforce. So in addition to the value added kind of for the long term, there's also the local preference in hiring and use of work that's part of the agreement that will bring benefit back to the town.
And just for point of notification here, when we talk about jobs in the TIF agreement, the EACC only recognizes full-time positions. So as you're talking about what are those temporary workers that are going to be working on contracting, that's a number in addition, right? So when we talk about what goes in that TIF agreement, what does this company need to be in compliance, what are they going to report on annually, those are the on-site full-time workforce. Aside from that, what are the construction jobs it's going to take to get the place up and running? Who are the landscapers? Who's going to be doing trash removal? What about the snow removal, right? What are these other ancillary duties that will have employment? Those are above these 150 jobs that are being documented in the TIF for compliance for your program.
Okay, if I could just follow up on that one, Margaret. Thank you for that explanation. And I found it helpful that your clarification as well of the contract, I guess, status employees would be above and beyond the full-time. And when I hear full-time, I'd also assume that that is employees of the company receiving benefits, et cetera. Traditional. Thank you. And I can understand, having been a while in the tech business, the need for additional contract work in the form of, there may be project managers, there may be scrum masters, or whatever the case may be. Testers, et cetera. So thank you. That's very helpful. And if I understood that also correctly, that you would be that the company would be working with a employment provider for those types of services here, located in the Braintree vicinity. Again, vicinity, not, you need to look for the right types of workers. Therefore, you can't narrowly put your scope on one particular location within the confines of our town. However, we have a numerous amount of professional, technical workers who do fall into these categories. So that is helpful to understand that process. Again, being above and beyond the 150 full-time employees. Speaking of contractors in the construction field, is it, and I'm sure this is, I'm not sure if it is the hiring of the construction trades craftsmen folks, is that up to the company in question, or would that be the owner of the property?
It'll be a combination of the two, Mr. Chairman. Some of the investment in the site will be performed by the landlord, so the property owner, Hilco. Some of the investment in the site will be performed by our tenant. So it's going to be a healthy mix of those two. And what that exact breakdown looks like from a dollars and cents perspective will ultimately be realized when the final lease negotiations conclude.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. Thank you, Brandon. I asked that question as well is because Braintree is a community of many tradespersons, professional tradespersons. We have a very a large amount of union affiliated tradespersons. as well as others who are, I guess, would fall into the category of non-tradesmen, but professional in their own right. I would be interested, as we move down the road here, of our local trades having an opportunity to work on these projects, on this particular project. The investment is really impressive from the tenant, what they want to do. $35 million, I'm sure, encompasses not only structural changes to the physical plant itself, and I also know that the highly specialized, or I would assume, pardon me, I would assume that the highly specialized implementation of this equipment, this very highly technical specialized equipment, would require a specialist. So any opportunity, I'd like to go on the record to say, providing union craftsmen an opportunity, and again, on top of providing local tradespeople, specialists, would be looked upon very favorably.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm sure you would be happy to know that in our discussions with Chief of Staff Taub, working through some of the elements of this agreement, which is still currently in draft form, we mutually agreed that, you know, our client as the tenant would consider using all commercially reasonable efforts in order to try to hire local. The reason we're saying it in that such way is because of this fact. There are just certain elements of the investment that a local contractor may not be able to provide. But
Understood.
Where that is applicable, we would be willing to entertain and do it and talk to and employ local where practical and reasonable.
Thank you. I will keep that in mind, and I can work with the mayor's office, Chief of Staff Taub, to keep appraised of the situation and how your construction schedule begins to work, the engagement with your general contractor, etc. It would be helpful to know. I know that there are probably some other councils who feel very strongly about that as well. So thank you. Again, another piece of our local economy that's going to benefit from this project. I do have, if I can indulge my other fellow council members, I just have a couple of points of clarification I'd like to ask. I know that the question was asked, and I understood the answer of what was the basis of a April 5th deadline requirement for approval by the council. So in the language provided to us on that, let me see. There was a date, an explanation of how the process works from state approval, and there was a reference to the committee meeting on April 5th. Let me see if I can find that. And I was trying to determine whether or not that was a reference of the committee of the Ways and Means, or is there a working committee of some type involved in the state approval process? And maybe Margaret, you could answer that question for us.
No, the April 5th date is referring to your committee, the Ways and Means Committee. The EACC, Economic Assistance Coordinating Council, that meeting is next in June 16th, with a May 18th filing deadline. If this project were coming for tax credits from us, they would have an April deadline. However, this company, being a life science company, would get tax credits through the Mass Life Science Center. We've had conversations with them about putting them into their program. So that other date was also, you know, getting our application from them. Could have had an April, got moved to May. But I think the sensitivity really here is you've got a company, you've got a landlord who is definitely anxious to get this signed. You've got a company who has a board of directors who needs to get approval to move forward for next steps, and getting everything lined up in order, as we said, closing out June, closing out your fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Now, I know there's another level of sensitivity for the announcement of the unveil, I guess, if you will, of the manufacturing question. That there's a level of sensitivity around notification of current employees in their current locations, and you know, not knowing who and where this prospective company moving here to Braintree is located, I know that it's somewhere on the East Coast. So are there, and I'm assuming there are, particularly since you have identified this area, the Boston area, as one of qualified worker pool, that do you feel confident as you incrementally move, and I understand, I think if I understood it correctly in the explanation over the time, that there'd be incremental moves of the staff into the building as operationally was feasible. So maybe you could touch a little on that.
Yeah, I think it's a short answer to that question, Mr. Chairman. The answer is in any move, there is some level of attrition. However, in this scenario, we feel like it could be relatively de minimis and highly controlled. We're very confident that there'll be no disruption to the operations via a relocation to a Braintree site.
Okay. I guess another way to look at it is that those who choose or can't make that move with the company is another added opportunity to the local workforce to join a company like this. So thank you. I appreciate that. All right. The notification on Friday, the board meeting, I would ask on behalf of the members of the committee for that information to be expeditiously passed on to us as is possible, to provide us with a good amount of time, additional amount of time for us to perform our due diligence and to ask certain questions as well, and seek those answers through our own research. So until we meet again, I should say, I'm going to make a proposal to my fellow council members that, due to the fact that two reasons: one, that we do not have that name yet, and number two, I would like the opportunity of Councilor Mackin to be available for a vote on this. That I would be making a suggestion for a motion, not necessarily at this particular moment, for a continuance to April 5th. So, but before I do that, I would like to ask again, Nicole, Chief of Staff Taub, if there's anything in addition that you would want to add before I ask the councilors one more time for any comments or questions they may have before we continue the meeting.
Thank you, Chairman Reynolds. I would just, thank this committee for their questions and, their interest and certainly rightfully placed desire to do the due diligence and gather all of the necessary information. As was referenced, this is new for us. This is very exciting for us. And I know that we are all looking forward to moving this project through to the next step. And so thinking about next steps, as soon as I get the go from Brandon, I will hit send on what will be an already drafted email to Clerk Semino for sharing with the members of the committee with as much information as we can offer with regards to the company and the relocation, so that you have the time to review that and do your own kind of background and consideration of them. It is our plan on the 5th, when this committee meets again. Is it 5 or 5:30?
Clerk Semino.
5:30.
5:30 in person, which will be great. And this team will be with us, as will, as I understand it, representatives from the company directly. So you'll be able to hear from them more about their operations and the desire to relocate to Braintree. And so hopefully with the information provided that evening, and again, any questions that may come up between now and then, please send them along and we'll continue to provide responses as quickly as we can. And hopefully on the evening of the 5th, before the full council meets at 7:30, we'll be able to obtain a recommendation from the committee so the full council can then take it up that evening, so that we can stay on track and allow the company to execute a lease with the landlord and really begin the investment that they're committing to making to this property and to Braintree as soon as possible. Otherwise, unless the team has anything else, Mr. Chairman, I will, happy to answer any additional questions before we continue for the evening.
Okay, and thank you. I do believe that the leveling of expectations ahead of time is very helpful for us. I mean, we do live and we learn. And as you had stated, this is a first go around for this administration in a TIF. And we could perhaps have conversations later, just kind of as an after action, as I like to do, of what I think has worked well, what I think would have made it work perhaps just a bit smoother, as is always an opportunity. And that is, I'm not leveling a criticism. So, but as always, there's opportunity. That being said, I'm going to just turn it over one more time to the counselors if they have anything in addition they'd like to add.
I had one final question, and
Yes.
I know that Chief of Staff Taub has kind of made some concluding remarks, and I can understand why. But I have one last question. I have a pretty good sense of what $1.2 million means to the Braintree budget over 15 years. And my question is, what do you want me to know about what percentage of the net profit that your client has? What does that $1.2 million mean to your client as a percentage of the net profit over 15 years?
So what? Go ahead.
Can I actually just if I may, before Brandon takes that. So I think it's important to note, and I think everybody has the chart, which I'm a visual person, if anybody else is a visual person, to kind of show what the impact on a TIF is on the community and on the revenue source. Because I don't want to suggest that the town is losing $1.2 million, because the only reason in this moment that we're even contemplating an increase in the tax base from this property is because of the user looking to move in. And the investment that the user makes is going to take our base revenue from here and bring it up to here. And so while we're gonna collect 75% of the increment for 15 years, in addition to the base value, at the end of that term, the value of the revenue coming from the property is going to be significantly higher than if the property remained vacant, which in that case, you risk actually losing revenue because of the potential for abatements, which have been given to this property in the past due to its vacant status. You run the risk of a less desirable tenant. And there was one of the questions asked about, why is the TIF necessary? What research have we done? And since my involvement started with the property after it became vacant in late 2019, the only potential tenant that wasn't also seeking a TIF as part of the move-in was large scale last mile delivery, which does not add the value that a tenant of this nature does. And in fact, it probably creates a greater negative impact than if it stayed vacant, obviously, because you're going to have an increase in traffic that you're not going to see through another type of user. So what the tenant does is it, in effect, guarantees an increase in the value of the property, which results in an increase to the revenue that the town is going to generate, even with the discount being applied. So I don't want folks to see this as a loss or as the town giving something up. It's actually going to collect greater revenue because of the occupancy, even with the discount being afforded over the life of the TIF. And I think that that's really important. So while we continue to collect taxes off the base value over the life estimated, and Ed is here, but these are the numbers that we've kind of run. In addition to the $5 million off the base value, which is going to be the July 1, 2022 valuation of the property, we're going to see additional revenue anywhere estimated at $4.5 to $5 million from the property over the life of the TIF that we would not see if it stayed vacant, or a less desirable tenant, or a tenant who wasn't making the type of capital commitment to the property would have, as far as an impact on the revenue is concerned. So that, I just think that that's a really important takeaway. It's something it took me a little bit to wrap my head around, but the town's not giving anything up. It's going to collect above and beyond what it would otherwise if a tenant such as this one didn't move into the property. So I didn't mean to jump ahead of you, Brandon, but I thought that that was an important point to make in response to Councilor Flaherty's concern.
Chief of Staff Tava could not have said that better. Thank you.
Same. And also, your last mile delivery tenant is not going to show up with $53 million to invest to improve the property, right?
And they also would be highly mobile. So
And not the job count.
they would not be staying here for the duration that we're considering. Also, Councilor Flaherty, I would like to just add one additional piece to, you question net profit. When we look at these typically for our clients, we're not really looking at a net profit line, but rather a more perhaps illustrative metric for that may well be the operating expense of the individual facility. So rather than looking at it from a corporate level, the balance sheet of this individual facility is going to be based upon, its ability to turn a profit. If it was not turning a profit, the facility could very well be relocated. So one of the things that happens is by reducing the cost of the lease, taxes flow through the lease. It makes the lease less expensive to the company who's investing there because of the reduction of tax as part of a triple net lease. That goes directly to the operating expense of the company and allows them to have a little bit more flexibility in that and ultimately run a more balanced, profitable operation that can continue to not only invest, but reinvest in that site. So while we can't specifically point to an action that we're saying we're going to use the TIF over 15 years to do this, this is commonly how we look at it. We don't really look at it on a corporate level, but rather on an individual location level when we're trying to model the impacts.
Okay, those were both very helpful comments. And I am really done asking questions tonight.
Excellent questions. All right. Well, I think that we have reached the end of the road this evening for what we can discuss. And I would like to ask if there is a motion to continue this discussion. We will table the discussion. I just want to go to my parliamentarian here, Clerk Semino. We table the discussion in the language till April 5th, 2022, or is there something else in this procedure?
So for a committee meeting, we actually do not need to give a date certain. So we can just table to future Ways and Means meeting. We all know it's April 5th, but we don't need to actually say that in this motion for a
Very
committee.
good. Thank you. That being said and understood, I will ask for a motion from the council members.
Motion to table order 22017 to a future Ways and Means meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Very good. Clerk Semino, a roll call, please.
Councilor Reynolds,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Aye.
Councilor Mackin is not attending. Councilor Maglio.
Aye.
It's 3 in favor.
All right, that is unanimous, and this motion has been tabled to a future date, April 5. Next Ways and Means Committee meeting is scheduled for 5:30 in person at Cahill Auditorium, Braintree Town Hall. And with that, pardon me?
Chairman Reynolds, it's in Johnson Chambers.
Johnson Chambers, I stand corrected. Thank you. Okay. So I appreciate everybody's time this evening. I appreciate the in-depth questions and the in-depth answers and the patience. So I wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Roll call,
So
please.
moved.
Oh my, excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. Can't tell I'm eager to get to dinner.
Right?
Right. So
Council
we have a
Flaherty,
motion from Council Flaherty to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in, well, roll call, please. Clerk Semino.
yes, thank you. Council Reynolds,
Aye.
Council Flaherty,
Aye.
Council Maglio,
Aye.
all in favor to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you very
Good night,
much. Good evening,
everybody.
everybody. Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.